whatever.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel.
Whereas if that supplement was
Before we
typed
get
with,
started,
say,
click that subscribe
say
button, turn on
3 years ago,
notifications,
even, or
give me
5
a
years
huge
ago,
thumbs up, and click the bell to
your
see
name would
notification.
come up to the
And
top of the
whenever
list.
I post a new
And,
video,
you know, you'd see maybe some
oh yeah,
stories
whenever
that
you
you were,
click the bell,
that
click
you authored,
all.
or maybe the product or something that you developed,
So,
then your name would come up. Not today. You disappeared. And, you know, you said, well, you haven't disappeared. You're still there. You haven't done anything different. You're still doing exactly what you did. But Google is treating you as a non-person now. It almost reminds me a little bit of 1984, where Winston worked in the Ministry of Information, and his business half the time was scratching out people from history. They just ceased to exist. Every record, even their birth record, was erased, and nobody would ever hear that person's name again if they went to look. They couldn't find him. And then finally to figure out, maybe it was just my imagination. I never really knew somebody like that anyway. But Google has this power to present information that it wants you to hear or see. And they can manipulate minds and mindsets. It's just amazing. It's so amazing that they even said internally that they believe they have the power to throw the 2000 election away from Trump because of this very feature. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If any person or organization sets themselves up intentionally to overthrow the government of the United States, I think there's a term for that called sedition. And it might be a way to insurrection in the end as well. But that doesn't bother these people. You see, there's no ethical guide whatsoever that tells them this is wrong and don't do it. They feel this is perfectly normal. They've got the data. They make the rules. It's just like in the last issue, you say whoever has the gold makes the rules. Well, now it's whoever has the data makes the rules. And so they're influencing people and they're nudging people in one direction or another direction. And it's extremely dangerous because those who are susceptible to that kind of manipulation,
y'all see them
once they are in that manipulation channel, they can get them to do anything under the sun. It's like once you hypnotize somebody, you can give them suggestions. To do, you know, like pluck like a chicken.
Yeah, I want one with ketchup and one with chili.
Power over people. Once it gets a hold of the person and really starts messing with their mind,
let me scoot
then they can feed all kinds of stuff into it and get them to do all kinds of things they would not have otherwise done.
But do you believe this knowledge that was captured by Google that was largely responsible for creating the circumstances that led to the massive government intervention that there no way would have ever been able to get away with had they not had some understanding of what motivated people? So I believe that's what I believe. I believe that really at the core of this was the data that Google was generating. And allowed them to know very accurately predict exactly what would happen if certain scenarios were.
And that's true for Facebook and Twitter and other entities like that as well. Everybody's kind of like piled on now to this meme. And you can't look at a Mark Zuckerberg, and I challenge people to do this, you can't look at a Mark Zuckerberg, you can't look at the head of Twitter, you can't look at
Jack Dorsey,
you can't look at Google and say, these are communists. You just can't do that. They're technocrats. They march to a different tune, completely, and they could care less about the political ideology behind it. What they're doing is they're engineering their view of the future, where mankind should go, and they're the only ones that have that narrative. And the proof of that is, and I have to bring this up, is
did you see that?
Of course everybody's they're
all the way over there.
They're always after conservatives. You know, they're left wing because they always censor conservatives. That is not true.
I think that's enough.
They censor a lot of conservatives, but they also censor a lot of non-conservatives for the same reasons, because it's issue-based. If you get after, if you start, I don't care who you are, what your political persuasion is, if you start writing against vaccines, for instance, or against some type of public misconception, or against things like glyphosate or whatever, might be your thing, you'll find yourself just censored just right along with everybody else. And your
and
stories
tell
will
me down
disappear.
below,
You'll be
favorite
shadow
character.
banned, they'll be pushed
Y'all
down the
is in
stack where they
Frozen.
don't appear in the
Like there's
sections
Olof,
anymore. And
Spin,
it doesn't really have to
Elsa,
do with a class
Anna,
of people that they're censoring. It has to do
Kristoff,
with the topics that
Hans.
are being censored. That's the key thing here to
Do not
understand.
choose him.
One of the
He's a
key
bad
topics
guy.
today that they are so
He did not
in love
help
with
Anna.
to
Never.
get
She
done
needed help.
is
She
this
needed
idea
a true love's kiss.
of global manipulation of the pool, of the
But-
human pool, to get the medical hooks into your body. This is social engineering
Olaf
at
is
its
doing
extreme,
good.
where they're not only just engineering the society around you, the environment
Oh yeah,
around
this
you,
is one of the pencils
but
I
that's
have.
not enough. They also want to engineer
like-
you.
Because
personally.
our chairs, they're
And
like
this is
hard on the
their
back.
mind right now. We've seen evidence of this
like
all
they're
over the
polka
place.
dot
I don't want
black.
to go into it and
So
confuse this
they're
conversation.
tiny
But
dots.
this is
So,
where
like,
it's going.
I like
This
doing
is
that.
the social engineering, the science of social engineering.
I
And
don't
you
know,
simply
so
are
taught
part
me at
of
school.
the one little cog in
I
that
just
whole
like doing
big
it now.
picture that they look at.
So it seems one of their goals too that you mentioned is
Also, do y'all like
Sustainable
that?
development.
My mom and dad.
Yeah.
that is ostensibly a good thing and beneficial
Yeah,
thing.
hers does
But why don't you help us
too.
understand why
I think
ultimately it's not?
everyone in my family loves mustard.
Well,
except for
that's right. The United
Scott and
Nations has declared
I'm not a big fan of
that
mustard.
sustainable
I
development
can tell y'all that.
is going to be the new economic system of the future. It's a resource-based economic system. It's based on energy. You see they
Also,
talk about cap and trade and
Olaf's
carbon and stuff all over the
teeth, they're
place.
white.
And a couple
So,
of years
I'm
ago,
not gonna color
the head of
those,
climate change
but I am
at
gonna
the
color
UN,
his-
Christiana Figueres,
His hands
gave a press
brown
conference in Europe, and she said, this is the first time in the history of
eyebrows
mankind that
brown.
we're setting ourselves the
So,
task
yeah.
of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial
Also, if
Revolution.
y'all
That's a
didn't
direct
know,
quote from her lips.
not know how to
I've
make
dedicated a
this,
chapter in
all you
my
have
book
to do,
to
go search it
demonstrate
up
that
on
sustainable
Google,
development is
anything.
technocracy
Just
from
say-
the 1930s. It has all the same markers, it has all the same
just say
elements in
kind
it.
papers
It was
of
brought to the United
something,
Nations by members
like
of the Trilateral
of
Commission, by the way,
Frozen
in the
or
first place.
of
And the entire doctrine of sustainable development,
Spider-Man.
and
Cars.
the other terms around it, you
'Cause
see, if people don't understand
anything
that, maybe
of
green
it will
economy
just
would be
sew up.
one, maybe
Even
Green
the
New Deal
elf.
would be something people would kind of identify with.
My dad's making hot
Sustainable
dogs
development
back there. So.
is the
Yeah.
United Nations, and they were the contagion that took it to the world.
Ooh, yeah.
This is their vision for the
Now I'm
future
gonna get
of
the
society,
brown.
is the sustainable future where
Yeah,
they
this
will
brown.
control
I thought I
all the
had another
resources
brown, but it
and
didn't.
all the consumption. In other words, they will tell businesses what they're allowed to build, and they will tell consumers what they're allowed to consume. Period in the subject. You don't need to be involved in this. They figure this all
Also,
out for
just
you
in
in
case if
advance.
y'all know
This is the
how to dump
science
this, you
of
just
social
take-
engineering here. They have the
Oh,
science.
wow.
You just have to follow and do
This
what they
is
tell you to do.
definitely full.
And it's very insidious. Of course, they have nice platitudes like we're
take
going to
off
eliminate
the
poverty, we're
top.
going to have education for
You just
all,
take
we're
it
going to have
off
jobs with
and-
dignity, and that's all wonderful stuff. But when you get down to the bottom of their so-called sustainable development goals, you see this whole thing of, well,
This is
all you have to do to
definitely
get those things is just let us have all the control over the resources and management of those resources on a global basis.
Let me show you.
Scotty, you want chili on your hot
Yes,
dog?
indeed. So
Like, it's so
this
cool.
is one of their goals. Now,
The
I'm
shadow
wondering if you could
is
help me
to right
understand
there.
the creation
Uh-oh.
of the Trilateral Commission,
Think
which
I'm,
seems to be
have to move.
behind the implementation of technocracy in the United States. What I don't
Oh,
completely appreciate is the connection to the
God, press
history
this down
prior to,
right.
not necessarily the 1930
then if I
history,
don't
but even
see it
prior
just
to
pops
that,
right
because
back
there was
up.
these forces that seemed to want to control the world. And
there's
I
no
think
way
many
I'm gonna
refer
sit
to them
back.
politely as the international
I'm gonna go
bankers,
dump
and that might
this
extend
real
to the
quick.
Rothschilds being
I'm gonna leave y'all
a
there,
big
though,
part of
so
this and
I'll be
collecting much of
right
the
back.
world's wealth, and then beyond them, Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and many others. So because you don't mention it in your books, other than Rockefeller in 1975, but clearly there's got to be some history connecting these, because their vision and their goals are so aligned. It's difficult to imagine they're not united in some way.
Yes. I titled my latest book, Technocracy, the Hard Road to World Order. The subtitle there, The Hard Road to World Order, was actually the title of an article written in 1974. It appeared in Foreign Affairs magazine.
The chair's only about
Most people don't know this,
I'm
but
about
if you
to
went back and looked at it, you'd find out
and then
an article
whenever I
written by
sit
Richard
down-
Gardner. He was an academic at the time. Gardner was also one of the original members of the Trial Out Commission.
I'm not
So he
that
was one of
short,
their academic
but
members, right, that wrote the
that's
papers.
why I
Kind of like,
You know
like
what
the
I mean?
global warming, the big trial of people do, they get the studies
Is that
paid
it's a
for,
little bit
and they
higher?
can make them say whatever. Well, Gardner was one of those academics
Yeah,
back then
I
that
got
supported
all
the Trial Out
cleaned
Commission.
up. See?
And here's what he wrote in that essay that
What?
appeared, and that I kind of.
I'll start off with
I think he deserved a response. This is what he wrote.
Yeah.
So in short, the House of World Order would have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down.
Oh,
It will look like a great booming,
That proves that
buzzing
we're having
confusion,
hot
to use
dogs.
William James' famous description of reality, but an end
I was
run
asleep
around
and
national
then I
sovereignty,
woke up and
eroding
Mom
it
was
piece
working on
by
something down
piece,
there and I was
will
just throwing away
accomplish
the
much
trash
more
that she had
than
me
the
do and then
old-fashioned frontal
I was like,
assault.
I need
That's
to
a
do a
quote.
cutting
This
paper
is packed with
thing.
stuff.
Like, I need
Number
color.
one, he talks about the
And
old-fashioned
like
frontal
the
assault, which is kind of what you're alluding
before I
to. Well,
thought
in the
that
past,
dude
before that, there had
I was
been
like,
many so-called
I'm gonna go
frontal
ask
assaults
Scott
to change the
if he
system.
wants to do it with
They'd
me.
all failed.
Like a coloring
They didn't
contest.
get anywhere. They just tried
But
brute
he's like,
force to do it, and they didn't get anywhere.
So
And national sovereignty
I'm just
was
like-
the big stumbling block, basically, because Americans held on to the
want
Constitution.
color.
So they talk about an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by
I'm
piece.
just gonna
Well,
put my
isn't
hot
that
dog here
exactly
whenever I
what's happened
get
over
it.
the last
I'm gonna put it
45
right here
years?
and then eat
Took them a long
while
time, but
coloring.
they're just about complete with
So,
that.
yeah.
And most importantly, it says that building the world order from the top down, which didn't work, the frontal assault, it needed to be built from the bottom up. In other words, from the local
Frozen
grassroots
is
level
one of my
up.
favorite movies.
That's exactly
Okay.
what sustainable development has done now on a global basis. They have gone to every local community
Where's Funko?
and seeded those sustainable development ideas into those communities so that they can build the system from the bottom up. That's part of their infrastructure also. But this article was just an amazing telltale article back then. Sutton recognizing its importance back then, as did I. But now, coming to 2020, I look at this quote, I look at what he said in 74, and I said, man, this guy was a visionary, not a prophet. He didn't have a crystal ball. But this was their strategy that they set in play back then.
Well, my guess is that he wasn't smart enough to figure that out, but he was smart enough to learn from history. And there was a Chinese general, Sun Tzu, wrote the book The Art of War 2,500 years ago. And it sounds like he adopted many of the principles that are encouraged in that book.
Yes,
It's the same darn strategy. If it worked 2,500 years ago, why wouldn't it work now?
that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, I
So
wanted them.
along those lines, and this is, one of the, as I've become hopefully wiser as I've grown older, and not taken the Lone Ranger approach, try to collaborate with other people, and to recognize that it is beyond foolish to not ignore and not adopt strategies that work. And they're classic. They're very clever. They're strategic, and they're winning. So the counter to this is that the same strategies can be employed by us to counter this. And we've actually used some of it. I don't want to discuss it now because we'll give our hand of what we're doing. at a broader base, because you have to do it stealth. But we're doing things that have been very, very successful that infiltrate some of their behavior, at least in the medical model. So I'm wondering if you can make recommendations of what the average viewer can do through their own community to prevent the continued and relentless assault of technocracy into our culture.
Right. It is a tough one, and it's not always an easy answer, but I believe very strongly that local activism at this point is the only way to rebuild our country, if there is going to be any rebuilding at all. Local activism. This is how they got us, was building it from the bottom up. We cannot tear their house down from the top down. It simply is just not going to happen. They're too powerful.
I'll let you go on, but let me just interject here that I think is an important point. That literally obliterates anyone's idea and concept that they think they're going to vote someone in office is going to make a difference. It ain't going to happen that way, folks. You can vote in whoever you want. It's not going to work. Would you agree with that?
I said the same thing more than once. I'll tell you, we cannot expect the cavalry to come over the hill like in an old Western, blowing the trumpet, yay, we're saved, we're saved. There is no national government or any element of national government that's going to save us from these technocrats and technocracy. There's no state government either. In fact, there's even really no local government the way it stands now, unless that local government gets influenced and populated by people who know better and who are willing to tell these others, go away, you don't belong here. This is not the way we're going to run our community, our town, or city, whatever it is. And we have access to those people. It's not like
that's a good point. Because let me just expand my comment, because it is not quite true. The most important elected official in your entire community is your sheriff, and we've seen that in these recent lockdowns and demonstrations. Is that the local sheriff is the one that's assigned the responsibility of enforcing the tyrannical edicts of the government. And if they choose not to, government has no power. So your local sheriff is the key, and I wouldn't be concerned about any other elected official.
That's a good one. And I'll say, again, of course, you need to elect the right constitutional sheriff to do the job, because a lot of sheriffs are simply not, they just don't care about upholding the Constitution that they swore to uphold when they took office. But the concept of who's going to flavor your local government, it's only up to people in the end of it. And people have gotten so conditioned to always look at somebody much higher than them to solve their problems. This might have been true for a time, I don't know really when, but this simply is not the way the world works. It's not the way our political system was ever designed to work. We're supposed to have local influence, and all the people above us that come into elected positions, they all come from the local level originally. Somehow they had to be born somewhere. Somebody had to know them. They probably started out with working, maybe getting elected to some board or something, a water board or a school board or whatever. When you have access to those people, that's when you need to educate them, to get to know them, to find out their strengths and weaknesses, etc., and keep them going in the right direction. But anyway, local activism right now, I fully believe, is the only salvation for our country. If there's going to be any rebuilding of the fabric of our country, that's where it has to take place. That means John Q. Citizen is going to have to get off his couch, turn off Fox News, turn off CNN and all that stuff, and actually go out and meet people. Can you imagine? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there's a pandemic. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, yeah. Well, you can go meet people, but wear your mask. Well, I can't understand what you're saying, but, well, we'll work around those issues later, right? Those are just minor inconveniences to us right now. But local activism is the key to turning this back. And it has to happen with us. And city councils have incredible power, like the county sheriff does. Your city council has the ability to pass binding resolutions that could just put these people on their head if they knew what to do, if they would just, start think through the issues and say, hey, we're not going to do that here. There was a city in California, I can't remember the name right now. Somebody got to the city council, educated every one of them. The city council held a referendum, and they passed a binding resolution that says there will be no agency of the city or any other activity of the city that will support Agenda 21, and they banned Agenda 21 from their city, lock, stock, and barrel. It's just a small city, but I thought, yeah.
So why don't you tell us what Agenda 21 is, because some people may not know what that is.
Well, that's true. I brought it up, didn't I? Agenda 21 is the keystone document for sustainable development. It was developed in 1992 at the Rio de Janeiro Conference of the United Nations, the so-called, it was the first Earth Summit, as well as, I forget they call it the IUCN or something, but it was a big United Nations meeting. And this became the agenda for the 21st century. And the doctrine that came to be known as Agenda 21 came from a book that was written just a few years earlier by Gru Harlem Brundtland. She chaired the Brundtland Commission for the United Nations, and she produced a book called Our Common Future. And that book was singularly the book that fueled all the doctrines that went into Agenda 21. The United Nations considered her to be the mother of Agenda 21. It just incidentally, Gru Harlem Brundtland was a member. She chaired the committee and she wrote the book, edited.
They don't call Olof black. There's still 4, 5. 6, 7, 8. We still have 8 flies in here. Well, 9 flies. Yep, there's 9.
There's so many things wrong with our current culture.
There's 10 flies.
Social engineering concept again. It's perfectly in line. Other entities like that as well. Everybody's kind of like piled on now to this meme. And you can't look at a Mark Zuckerberg, and I challenge people to do this. You can't look at a Mark Zuckerberg. You can't look at the head of Twitter. You can't look at
Jack Dorsey.
You can't look at Google and say, these are communists. You just can't do that. They're technocrats. They march to a different tune completely, and they could care less about the political ideology behind it. What they're doing is saying stuff all over the place. And a couple of years ago, the head of climate change at the UN, Christiana Figueres, gave a press conference in Europe, and she said, this is the first time in the history of mankind that we're setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. That's a direct quote from her lips. I've dedicated a chapter in my book to demonstrate that sustainable development is technocracy from the 1930s. It has all the same markers, it has all the same elements in it. It was brought to the United Nations by members of the Trilateral Commission, by the way, in the first place. And the entire doctrine of sustainable development and the other terms around it, you see, if people don't understand that, maybe green economy would be one, maybe Green New Deal would be something people would kind of identify with. Sustainable development is the United Nations, and they were the contagion that took us to the world. This is their vision for the future of society. Is the sustainable future where they will control all the resources and all the consumption. In other words, they will tell businesses what they're allowed to build, and they will tell consumers what they're allowed to consume. Period in the subject. You don't need to be involved in this. They figured this all out for you in advance. This is the science of social engineering here. They have the science. You just have to follow and do what they tell you to do. And it's very insidious. Of course, we have nice platitudes like we're going to eliminate poverty, we're going to order. The subtitle there, The Hard Road to World Order, was actually the title of an article written in 1974. It appeared in Foreign Affairs magazine. Most people don't know this, but if you went back and looked at it, you'd find that article. It was written by Richard Gardner. He was an academic at the time. Gardner was also one of the original members of the Trilateral Commission. So he was one of their academic members, right, that wrote the papers, kind of like the global warming and the big pharma people do. They get the study paid for, and they can make them say whatever. Well, Gardner was one of those academics back then that supported the Trilateral Commission. And here's what he wrote in that essay that appeared, and that I kind of modeled my book after. I figured he deserved a response. This is what he wrote. He said, in short, the House of World Order would have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. It will look like a great booming, buzzing confusion, to use William James' famous description of reality. But an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. That's a quote. This is packed with stuff. Number one, he talks about the old-fashioned frontal assault, which is kind of what you're alluding to. Well, in the past before that, there had been many so-called frontal assaults to change the system. They all failed. They didn't get anywhere. They just tried brute force to do it, and they didn't get anywhere. And national sovereignty was the big stumbling block, basically, because Americans held on to the Constitution. So they talk about an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece. Well, isn't that exactly what's happened over the last 45 years? Took them a long time, but they're just about complete with that. And most importantly, it says that building the world order from the top down, which didn't work, the frontal assault, it needed to be built from the bottom up. In other words, from the local grassroots level up. But that's exactly what sustainable development has done now on a global basis. They have gone to every local community and seeded those sustainable development ideas into those communities so that they can build the system from the bottom up. That's part of their infrastructure also. But this article was just an amazing, amazing telltale article back then. Something recognizing its importance back then, as did I. But now, coming to 2020, I look at this quote, I look at what he said in 74, and I said, man, this guy was a visionary, not a prophet. He didn't have a crystal ball. But this was their strategy that they set in play back then.
My guess is that he wasn't smart enough to figure that out, but he was smart enough to learn from history. And there was a Chinese general, Sun Tzu, wrote the book The Art of War 2,500 years ago. And it sounds like he adopted many of the principles that are encouraged in that book.
Yes.
It's the same darn strategy. If it worked 2,500 years ago, why wouldn't it work now?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So along those lines, and this is one of the as I've become hopefully wiser as I've grown older, and not taken the Lone Ranger approach, try to collaborate with other people, and to recognize that it is beyond foolish to not ignore and not adopt strategies that work. And they're classic. They're very clever. They're strategic, and they're winning. So the counter to this is that the same strategies can be employed by us to counter this. And we've actually used some of it. I don't want to discuss it now because we'll give our hand to what we're doing at a broader base, because you have to do it stealth. But we're doing things that have been very, very successful that infiltrate some of their behavior, at least in the medical model. So I'm wondering if you can make recommendations of what the average viewer can do through their own community to prevent the continued and relentless assault of technocracy into our culture.
Right. It is a tough one, and it's not always an easy answer, but I believe very strongly that local activism at this point is the only way to rebuild our country, if there is going to be any rebuilding at all. Local activism. This is how they got us, was building it from the bottom up. We cannot tear their house down from the top down. It simply is just not going to happen. They're too powerful.
And I'll let you go on, but let me just interject here, that I think is an important point. That literally obliterates anyone's idea and concept that they think they're going to vote someone in office is going to make a difference. It ain't going to happen that way, folks. You can vote in whoever you want. It's not going to work. Would you agree with that?
I said the same thing more than once. I'll tell you, we cannot expect the cavalry to come over the hill like in an old Western, blowing the trumpet. Yay, we're saved, we're saved. There is no national government or any element of national government that's going to save us from these technocrats and technocracy. There's no state government either. In fact, there's even really no local government the way it stands now, unless that local government gets influenced and populated by people who know better and who are willing to tell these others, go away. You don't belong here. This is not the way we're going to run our community, our town, our city, whatever it is. And we have access to those people. It's not like
that's a good point. So let me just expand my comment, because it's not quite true. The most important elected official in your entire community is your sheriff. And we've seen that in these recent lockdowns and demonstrations, is that the local sheriff is the one that's assigned the responsibility of enforcing the tyrannical edicts of the government. And if they choose not to, government has no power. So your local sheriff is the key, and I wouldn't be concerned about any other elected official.
That's a good one. And I'll say again, of course, you need to elect the right constitutional sheriff and to do the job, because a lot of sheriffs are simply not, they just don't care about upholding the Constitution that they swore to uphold when they took office. But the concept of who's going to flavor your local government, it's only up to people in the end of it. And people have gotten so conditioned to always look at somebody much higher than them to solve their problems. This might have been true for a time, I don't know really when, but this simply is not the way the world works. It's not the way our political system was ever designed to work. We're supposed to have local influence, and all the people above us that come into elected positions, they all come from the local level originally. Somehow they had to be born somewhere. Somebody had to know them. They probably started out with working, maybe getting elected to some board or something, water board or school board or whatever. When you have access to those people, that's when you need to educate them, to get to know them, to find out their strengths and weaknesses, etc., and keep them going in the right direction. But anyway, local activism right now, I fully believe, is the only salvation for our country. If there's going to be any rebuilding of the fabric of our country, that's where it has to take place. That means John Q. Citizen is going to have to get off his couch, turn off Fox News, turn off CNN and all that stuff, and actually go out and meet people. Can you imagine? Oh, wait a minute. No, there's a pandemic. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, yeah. Well, you can go meet people, but wear your mask. Well, I can't understand what you're saying, but, well, we'll work around those issues later, right? Those are just minor inconveniences to us right now. But local activism is the key to turning this back. And it has to happen with us. And city councils have incredible power, like the county sheriff does. Your city council has the ability to pass binding resolutions that could just put these people on their head. If they knew what to do, if they would just, start thinking through the issues and say, hey, we're not going to do that here. There was a city in California, I can't remember the name right now. Somebody got to the city council, educated every one of them. The city council held a referendum, and they passed a binding resolution that says there will be no agency of the city or any other activity of the city that will support Agenda 21, and they banned Agenda 21 from their city, lock, stock, and barrel. It's just a small city, but I thought, yeah.
Well, some people, so why don't you tell us what Agenda 21 is, because some people may not know it better.
Well, that's true. I brought it up, didn't I? Agenda 21 is the keystone document for sustainable development. It was developed in 1992 at the Rio de Janeiro Conference of the United Nations, the so-called, it was the first Earth Summit, as well as, I forget they call it IUCN or something, but it was a big United Nations meeting. And this became the agenda for the 21st century. And the doctrine that came to be known as Agenda 21 came from a book that was written just a few years earlier by Gru Harlem Brundtland. She chaired the Brundtland Commission for the United Nations, and she produced a book called Our Common Future. And that book was singularly the book that fueled all the doctrines that went into Agenda 21. The United Nations considered her to be the mother of Agenda 21. It just incidentally, Gru Harlem Brundtland was a member. She chaired the committee and she wrote the book, edited and wrote most of it. She was a member of the Trilateral Commission. So we know where this doctrine came from. We know where it came from. It's unmistakable. And this was trilateral policy to feed this Agenda 21 and sustainable development into the United Nations so it would become contagion to take it to the whole planet. And they have done a very good job of that. But
Yeah, we're not disparaging the strategy. The strategy is very clever and it's effective. We're disparaging what they're implementing. It's like trying to villainize or demonize a weapon like a gun. I mean, it could be used to save your friends and family, or it could be used to kill people. In homicides. It depends on the intent.
Exactly. So fast forward, we're dealing with all this Agenda 21, the 2030 agenda, the sustainable development stuff on local bases all over the planet. And we continue to deal with it. And the only way we can get rid of it is to think local, act local, and push it back up to them. Send the signal up the chain, and we're simply not going to put up with it, not going to do it. And if enough cities did this in America, it would turn these people on their head, and they would all run away packing the bags at the same time.
Well, that's a brilliant strategy, but in order to implement that, you need to educate the individuals seeking to engage in this process. So what would you recommend to get them up to speed, to have the knowledge base so they can effectively educate those local city council members?
Well, people have a lot of resources available to them, like programs like this, that there's a lot of money, and you gotta be careful what you watch, and don't get off in the weeds with conspiracy theories, but there's a lot of information on the internet and through really good books. You mentioned a couple, and that people can read to begin to understand the issues. But beyond that, when it comes to actually doing something, this is what led me about almost 3 years ago now to found a nonprofit organization called Citizens for Free Speech. And I did that when I saw the collusion between the big tech social media companies to target certain people to take them out of existence. That really bothered me because it hinted at collusion. And I said, man, if these people are talking to each other now, we're really in trouble. They're acting as a wolf pack, if you will, to hunt us down. So I started Citizens for Free Speech with the idea that all of this technocrat meme is attacking the First Amendment first. It's censoring our ability to communicate. It's keeping us from communicating with each other and with our government and with our our adversaries, in a sense, those who may not agree with us fully. But our ability to communicate has been completely decimated in America. We're so dysfunctional. We're as dysfunctional as the worst dysfunctional family that you could imagine today. Everybody's at everybody else's throat all the time. There's no patience. There's no civil discourse anymore. And I believe that what people really have to learn, if they're going to be local activists, they need to learn how to communicate their ideas. Once they've got ideas, They need to learn how to communicate those ideas to other people. Maybe those people agree with them, maybe they don't, but nevertheless, they need to be able to express their ideas in a way that everybody in the room doesn't get triggered and start hammering on you. This concept of appropriate communication is what restoring the First Amendment at this point is all about. And for those who kind of know what the First Amendment is all about, there's 5 things that are in it that are important to us. One is the free exercise of religion. The governor of California, the health department over there in California has just decided that people in churches, synagogues, and mosques can't sing because it would spread the virus. And so no singing in your church anymore. You can forget that. Well, you might be able to play an organ or something, but that's all. No singing. Freedom of speech is just shot right now. We've been talking about that. Freedom of the press. That's another thing. Articles get censored and spiked all the time. The right of people to peaceably assemble. You can't assemble when governors have given you an edict saying no more than 10 people or 50 people can get together in any type of thing. We can't petition the government for redress of grievances. The First Amendment is under an intense attack by these people. That's not by mistake. That's part of their strategy. Remember what Richard Gardner said, an end run around national sovereignty. That's part of it. Get rid of the First Amendment effectively. And what else do you have? Well, you have the Second Amendment. That's the first thing you see. I don't even want to talk about the Second Amendment. I support it totally, don't get me wrong. But if we lose the First Amendment, the Second Amendment was put there to take care of the loss of the First. And that's the strategy at this point that the enemy had, that those against us have to break America down, get rid of the First Amendment. They figure the rest of America will fall into chaos, probably military conflict, armed conflict. And that will make it just right for them to swoop in and take over when people then beg for anybody to put government back together, put the country back together. Just make it work, folks. And you could just, personally, I look at it, I could just see this coming. But the idea of supporting and defending the First Amendment is so critical right now. People can get the issues, but if they cannot communicate those issues effectively, what's the point? Why just sit on your couch and know everything there is to know if you have no ability to communicate that to somebody else?
I agree. So in your books, you mentioned that many of these local politicians may be absolutely unaware of that they're following technocracy. They're sort of migrated it for whatever means, and that they are not necessarily rigidly committed to those concepts, and they just need to be educated. So can you expand on that?
Well, it's there's a saying in politics, if you want to get along, you have to go along. There's a lot of peer pressure.
Yeah.
Peer pressure from your colleagues that might serve in the same body, peer pressure from your constituents, peer pressure from your opponent's constituents. You got a lot of people pushing and pulling all the time. That's just the nature of politics. But a lot of people that just kind of went along to get along never really understood the issues that they were pursuing or the issues that they were sold. And they still have a moral compass, they still have an ethical compass in their mind that you can appeal to. And you can kind of peg somebody when you're talking to them to find out where they're coming from. Like, do they really understand anything? Are they open to constitutional ideas? Are they open to really helping the public, or are they just looking for a way to get rich and they're just using their office like that? You can peg people like this pretty easily, and those that are open to be educated, man, you just need to zero in on them and just tell them, man, we love you and we want to support you. We'll do research for you. We want to help you do a better job for our community because, man, do we ever need it out here? And many people you'll find are very open to that. Political leaders are very open to hearing from citizens. And it's unfortunate that, you know, over the last 20, 30 years, people have gotten into this mode. Well, all of our elected people are too unapproachable. I can't approach them. I can't go talk to them. What would I say? I mean, I'm just a little guy out here. I'm nobody. And they bought that line that they have no right or no ability to go and address and communicate and engage, whatever, with their local leaders. That's really false. But my director of training, by the way, at Citizens for Free Speech, she sums it up like this. She says, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are what's for dinner.
That is really good.
And that's true. It's just absolutely true. You know, and it's to get a seat at the table. Just get out and mix it up. You'll have fun along the way, and you got good ideas in your head. Go out and share them with people. Maybe they won't buy it on day one, but hey,
persistence, yeah, and it's very clear that if we're going to have any hope of recapturing our country, and there's no guarantee that we will. I mean, we may have lost the war at this point. It might be too late. I don't know. But if we have any hope, we have to create an army. And this army is not one that is stocked with leads and bullets, with ammunition and bullets, but with relationship skills. You can go out and do connections on a one-to-one basis.
Yeah. There was a lot of talk today about us already losing the battle. And I hear this a lot. Here's how I respond. I want people to know this. We've had periods in our history where we had no idea that America was going to be able to survive the test that it was undergoing. We had the Civil War. We had World War I. We had World War II. And I'll tell you, at the beginning of those episodes, there was absolutely no guarantee that America would prevail as a country. And indeed, it looked awfully dim at some points in time where there was no hope. And I'm not saying that's an excuse to think, well, somehow we're going to get through this, but here's the attitude that America has had before, and it needs to have it today, I believe, as well. We do not do what we do because we're going to win. We do what we do because it's the right thing to do, period. And you just leave the results. It's out of your hands anyway, generally, but you do what's right because it's the right thing to do. And if enough Americans figure out, you know what, let's reinstall our moral compass to this country. Let's put our ethical needle back in place where it belongs, and let's start doing the right things in our country because they're the right thing to do, not because it's expedient, convenient, or it's going to get us rich or get us benefits from the government or whatever. Let's do what's right because it simply is the right thing to do. And right now, the right thing to do is to engage and push back against this nonsense that we're being inundated with.
Yeah, do you think that the technocrats have anticipated this counter and actually have moves to block that, or do you just think that they're concluding that America is just asleep at the wheel and there's no way there's going to be this type of response?
Well, there's growing awareness now, I believe, in America that something is drastically wrong. And I sense this awareness from a number of different angles, not just what people say to me, but for instance, the quantity, number of people that are coming to technocracy.news to read about technocracy and stuff, the traffic has just increased incredibly. I'm getting more emails and more communication from readers and stuff that, wow, I just saw this for the first time, I see what's going on. And I think there's a growing awareness that I have not seen in the last, say, 20 to 30 years. This is very encouraging. The other thing that I see is that people are willing now, that appreciate at least maybe what we're talking about here today. They understand the value now, or maybe the necessity of civil disobedience. And this is a very touchy subject. I don't want to go down the road too much, but we have reached the point where technocracy has pushed us into a corner where if we are not civilly disobedient, if you will, to their civil orders, not to what we should have, but if we do not resist this and say, we're not going along with your program, then they will continue to push us into the corner until we simply cannot get out of that corner. The time has come for people to do what they know is right and to protect themselves first, not to think about the greater good all the time. But I liken this to an airplane. When they give you the instructions before the flight, they say if the oxygen mask come down, put it on your face first and then help the person next to you.
Right.
Well, that whole thing's been flip-flopped now. Now we have to put the mask on to protect everybody else against us, even if it's detrimental to our own health. Once people see through the pseudoscience of face masks and social distancing and contact tracing and all these mechanisms that are being thrown down at us, once they start to see through the statistical models being totally erroneous, they're beginning to understand we just need to stop this behavior and not obey them. And my friend Mary Baker, I referenced a minute ago, she says that we simply must not play the role that they have assigned us to play. Whatever that role is, you may be different for different people. Sure. Whatever role they assign to you, you simply must not play it. And so if that means just saying, look, I'm not gonna deal with this face mask thing anymore, or I'm gonna sing in church. Thank you, it's my church. I'll worship the way I want, and we're gonna sing. This civil disobedience, I think, is ready to sweep the country. And that's going to throw a lot of flack back in the face of these technocrats who thought they could get away with it.
Yeah.
California is a good case in point, by the way. I know there's churches over there now that are banding together as a group to defy the governor on controlling the church's behavior and the people's behavior in the pews. They're going to take it, first they're just going to sing, and secondly, they're going to take it to court, and they're going to get discovery to bear on this whole thing and bring the hammer down on them. That's an appropriate thing. It's civil disobedience initially. People are just going to have to figure out in the end, how much are you willing to sacrifice?
Yes, there is going to be a sacrifice there. And I want to emphasize, it needs to be peaceful and respectful.
Yes.
This is not violent civil disobedience.
That's right.
This is peaceful civil disobedience. And I think it is really an essential, integral strategy to be effective at resisting this tyrannical assertion of technocracy and control of our society.
We must, I just hasten to add too, we must restore our Constitution, which is the framework for everything else in our nation. We must restore the effective application of the Constitution to our society. And of course, everybody that's against the Constitution is telling us it doesn't matter anymore. It's just doesn't, it's out to lunch. It's an old document. It's just baloney. But the Department of Justice just recently wrote a statement of interest to support a lawsuit that was lodged by a church in Greenville, South Carolina, against the city of Greenville for discriminating against their church. A great lawsuit. I won't even talk about it, but they had reason to file a lawsuit, believe me. And the Department of Justice came out with this statement, and they filed it with the court. I got a copy of it. I said, God, believe me, this will never hit the media. But here's what it says. There is no pandemic exception, however, to the fundamental liberties the Constitution safeguards. Indeed, quote, individual rights secured by the Constitution do not disappear during a public health crisis. These individual rights, including the protections in the Bill of Rights, made applicable to the states through the 14th Amendment, are always enforced and restrain government action. That's a direct quote from this brief just issued by the Department of Justice. And it's like, guys, holy mackerel. The Department of Justice is laying this out. These people have no right to trample on the Constitution, much less the Bill of Rights, much less the First Amendment. They have absolutely no right to do that. And only we, the people, can turn around and say, you know what, you can't do that, because it's supposed to restrain government action. That's what we need to do here, is restrain these knuckleheads from doing what they're doing to tear the fabric of our country apart.
Yeah, just want to repeat, because I think it's such an important component, is that ideally it's done in conjunction with the cooperation of the local sheriff who you help elect.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately that sheriff is going to be there to enforce these radically irrational interventions that the government is recommending. So many governments are not recommending, mostly democratic states, of course, but nevertheless there are, many Republican states are doing too. It's nonsensical from the perspective of a scientific justification for that, for the greater good, which it isn't. But it's done in cooperation with the sheriff. I mean, because there's many communities who had a cooperating sheriff who refused to enforce those government orders.
Yes, and it's a wonderful thing. We happen to be graced out in Arizona here with the presence of Sheriff Richard Mack, who is the
he's the ultimate
sheriff.
He's the leader. I want to interview him. He's good. Maybe you can give me his contact information, because I have an enormous respect for him.
Yes, and the reason that there are constitutional sheriffs out there, like the ones you referenced, are largely there because of his efforts to go out and instruct them on what their rights are as sheriffs to do. And those that accepted the challenge, when they had a threat appear, they said, wait a minute, we're not going to do that. We're not the Gestapo out here. We're not going to enforce your phony baloney orders from state level or whatever. We're going to support the Constitution in our county. It's a wonder, and I'll tell you, it's just a wonderful breath of fresh air to see a sheriff like that stand up for the people.
I think Richard is retired now, but he's instrumental in training other active sheriffs.
Yes.
And what a magnificently leveraged investment of time, effort, and energy, because you're not affecting the sheriff, you're affecting all the local communities. So, I mean, it's just, I'm going to have him on and just get his recommendation. I'd like to support him in any way. He's doing such a magnificent job at helping the country.
Yes, this is very important work. And he doesn't just speak to sheriffs, by the way. He speaks to other leaders of communities and stuff. He speaks to mayors. He speaks to anybody who's taken an oath of office, especially to uphold, defend, and support the Constitution. If you took an oath to do that, you either need to rescind your oath or you need to follow it. And if you want to follow it, you're not willing to rescind it, here's how you do that. And he just lays it out for him. It's so clear. It's so easy to understand. He's a great communicator. He's a great motivator. And he captures people, he captivates people when he speaks to them, especially one-on-one.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that recommendation, and I'll look forward to connecting with him personally. So, any other recommendations you have? Like, why don't you give us the details of your organization you've constructed for the free speech and your website again, and how people can find out more information about what you're doing?
Absolutely. Citizensforfreespeech.org. That's it. That's the website address. You can just go there and check it out. And I just encourage you to get on board. There's no charge to join. But we need people to stand together with us that realize that, hey, the First Amendment has just got to be restored. Everything else is lost. Secondly, too, I'll just mention that we've been distributing a no face mask card, plastic card with a lanyard that people can wear around their neck. And believe me, it works out here in Arizona. I wear it everywhere. And I just explain to people in stores and whatever, if they don't like I'm not wearing a mask, I say that, I believe this is harmful to my health, and I simply cannot wear a mask. And by and large, nobody's really yelled at me yet. I know some people get yelled at, but I haven't been yelled at yet. And I can walk into stores like Costco and Walmart and wherever, and nobody pays attention to it anymore. We encourage people to get a hold of one of these cards and just, if they're concerned about this, wear this card and explain to people what it's all about. That you have the right to choose whether or not you're going to participate in this or not. And if you don't want to choose, this is the terms of your not participating.
I just read this morning an article where the narrative in the mainstream media is they're seeking to identify people who refuse to wear masks with those who are drunk driving or texting while driving. This is irresponsible social behavior. That's what they're seeking to ingrain in the minds of the public.
Absolutely.
To vilify people.
There's public shaming, the cancel culture. It all comes to bear on this right now. this is part of the communication process that we need to overcome. We need to, push this line of thinking back and restore personal individual liberty to America. And I just still haven't met anybody that is kind of on that side, well, you're going to be selfish, whatever. When you talk to them and get right down to them, most of these people have the same values that we have. They just don't understand what their own values are. But when you kind of get them to drill that into it, you ask them a few questions and you get to know them a little bit, you know what? Most of them have the same concerns that we have. They just don't know how to express themselves.
Yeah, they're operating out of fear, a fear engineered by the mainstream media and the propaganda.
That's right.
They're driving people's minds because they're failing to follow Anthony Sutton's behavior from 50 years ago, which was turn off the television sets.
I know. People have asked me, what would Sutton say if he were alive today? He passed in 2002, by the way. and I can... What I remember of him, if he were alive today, he would have the shortest speech you ever heard. I think he would get up on stage and he would simply say, I told you so. And he would walk away.
Yeah, that's British humor for you.
It is, I know. It's like, he said, I'm not going to tell you anymore. I told you everything you need to know way back then, and you didn't get it. And
Well, I'm so glad you're a student of his and have really embraced the model of helping to educate people and help us understand these simple references. You've given so many pearls today. I mean, that are really practical, that can make a phenomenal difference if you just listen to and apply, and to understand that you can make a difference. It's you individually. It's not this somehow generic you, it's you taking the steps and positive actions if we have any hope of recovering our country and preserving our constitutional rights and freedoms.
that's exactly right. It's up to us, we people. It's up to us in the end if our country is going to be restored at all. And isn't this been the case all throughout our history? It was we people who broke free from England in the first place. A lot of people didn't want to do that back then, but there were enough that did, that said, we'll stand up and do it. It was we the people who have fought every war ever since and defended our country, and many gave everything they had, including their life, to defend what we have today as freedom and liberty. We can't do any less today. And yes, we do need an army of people, not an army to carry weapons, but an army to carry the message every corner of our country that what we know to be true really is true, and it really does work, and it really is fair, and it really is just, and the rule of law really does mean that we're supposed to apply the law equally to all people in America, regardless of race, color, creed, etc.
But those are out there.
And we need to put the system back in place effectively and get people away from the radical fringe and say, guys, you just need to come in from the cold. This is not acceptable.
Well, it's been such a great privilege and honor to connect with you, and for all, and I want to thank you for your nearly 5 decades of work in this area. And it's just a joy. I don't subscribe to any channel, but I view your videos all the time, and I look forward to each one that comes out. It's just really common sense, level-headed, direct communication. I really admire what you're doing. And what's the name of your YouTube channel? So if people want to get regular doses of you, how would they do that?
It's just Technocracy News and Trends.
Okay, Technocracy News and Trends.
Search for the word technocracy, it'll come up.
Yeah, it'll come up. So it's definitely one I looked at all your videos since I found out about you a few weeks ago. So yeah, it's great. Love it.
TikTok.
All right, well, thanks again. You're just doing a great service out there, and a really true patriot. So thanks for everything.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to say too, I appreciate your influence and your drive to do what you do. I run into people all the time, literally, and we study health issues quite a bit in our household, and everybody we talk to knows about Dr. McCullough, and they, you are alive and well in the hearts of America, whether or not Google wants you to be alive and well in their heart or not. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it is. Thankfully, I'm actually really quite surprised it's come until 2019 to essentially remove me from the search engines, and that we had, literally over 20 years to make a dent because I started my website before Google existed. And so we had a chance to penetrate. So we're in the minds and consciousness of a lot of people, and we don't need the search engine. The thing that saddens me the most is that it's difficult to reach the new people who are just engaged, not engaged, but exposed to all this propaganda and needless and unnecessary. But it is what it is, and we've got an army of people, and it's just communications like this that will help people to spread the word and engage in the behaviors we need to radically change our cultures.
An army of people who are telling other people one at a time,
right,
your website, that's it. Now see, that's exactly.
Well, not my website. It's just the truth. The truth. It's out there because there's so many things. I mean, I'm such an ardent fan of technology, not technocracy, but technology, because it's a weapon. It can be used for good or bad, and it's so. It's the greatest. I mean, the internet is the greatest invention in the history of mankind. And Sutton would have loved it. I mean, he did. He passed it without Q, but. I mean, he really didn't fully experience all the benefits of the even newer technologies that the internet offers. So it's just magnificent if you know where to plug into. And since actually just even the last few months, because my feeds have all changed, and I'm just engaging in consuming information that I never even knew existed for, like your channel. So. It's just magnificent. So anyway, it's good. I'm glad that your community knows the work I've been doing, so that's good.
Well, I appreciate it, and I really appreciate you having me on today. It's been great. I've followed you for some time as well, and we're birds of a feather, obviously.
All right. Well, you keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. I will. You too.
That was pretty good.
No, was it?
Yeah, I thought so.
That's why Watson was telling me it's not all a Democratic thing or liberal thing, it's Bush
Come back when I'm so close to being done. So and yet I'm almost done. The time just stays the same. But yeah, this is my house so far.
Sex fairly. Back on the executive orders the president signed this weekend. As a candidate, Donald Trump criticized fairly sharply Barack Obama's use of executive orders and faulting him for failing to reach deals with members of Congress. How are the president's actions this weekend any different from President Obama's?
They're a lot different when you consider the fact that President Barack Obama utilized executive order to push forward a policy that he denied he had the right to push forward 23 times on DAPA and on DACA. He said at least 23 times, I don't have the power to do this. And then he went on to do just that. I've already listed out and enumerated the various legal authorities on the part of the president, and in terms of deal making, I would note that the CARES Act was landmark legislation, at the key, at really the height of this pandemic that brought relief to the American people, and that was negotiated within 1 week from first drafting to enactment. And by comparison, if we want to go back to President Obama, the American Recovery Act during the Great Recession took roughly 3 months from inception to enactment as well, under single-party control. This president managed to push the CARES Act through divided government, a very big part of the Hello, everyone. Democrats in Congress failed to act in the best interest of Americans hardest hit by this pandemic. Amid inaction, President Trump stood up for every American who, through no fault of their own, needed relief. Politics, as usual, should find no place during this pandemic, but Democrats rejected multiple clean bills to provide relief. The American people are tired of games, they seek leadership, and President Trump delivered. This weekend, President Trump took executive action designed to provide the relief Democrats have denied to those who need it most. Through 4 executive orders, he took the following steps. On the payroll tax, he deferred payments of the employee portion of certain payroll taxes from September 1st through the end of 2020. On unemployment assistance, states will provide 25% cost sharing, amounting to a total of $400 per week in benefits through the end of the year. And then on third, he extended the eviction protections. President Trump will direct HUD to prevent evictions resulting from financial hardships caused by the virus, doing everything in his executive capacity to make sure those renting and those homeowners are protected. Finally, on student loans, he extended 0% interest and suspended loan payments through the end of the year. The bottom line is that these actions will help Americans. President Trump is for the American people, and Democrats failed to deliver. Also, earlier this year, hundreds of Americans, working men and women at the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, were told that they would lose their jobs to lower-paid foreign workers imported from abroad, and then suffer the further indignity of training their foreign replacements. President Trump boldly and resolutely intervened in defense of these hardworking Americans, rallying to their case, rushing to their aid, and taking action to restore their jobs. He invited laid-off workers and their representatives to the White House, and then fired the chairman of the board of the TVA and one other board member. President Trump offered an ultimatum. The firings would continue until the cruel and heartless decision to fire the hard-working Americans was reversed. TVA did reverse. Layoffs have been canceled and tech workers have been rehired. In the words of Gay Henson, president of the Engineering Associates IFPTE Local 1937, the labor union representing the 2,200 highly skilled professionals employed by the TVA. In Ms. Henson's words, the president's personal intervention saved these jobs, restored the workers to their rightful place, and set TVA on the path to returning to its mission of service to both the workers at the TVA and to the people of this country. And with that, I'll take questions.
Hi, Paris.
Good job. Hey, Paris, I made some hot dogs. I don't know if you've eaten them or not.
See that? I finished all my coffee.
And to understand just what is happening on the ground, what the heroic men and women of law enforcement are facing right now.
What?
It's helpful
If I make a supreme and pepperoni pizza,
to see directly what's occurring. There's a video that should
I'm kind of
display.
full right now. I might eat some.
Without our First Amendment rights, rights that protect the countless ways in which people can peaceably express their social and political views. And to understand just what is happening on the ground, what the heroic men and women of law enforcement are facing right now.
I'm almost done with
It's helpful
so
to see directly what's occurring, and there's a video that should display this now. Without our First Amendment rights,
and I'm
rights that
almost done
protect
with the
the
face.
countless ways in which people can peaceably express their social and political views. Democracy would want
brown and then I just
the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to demand changes, to petition their government for grievances, is in the very best tradition of America. No history of the United States, no recounting of the unending struggle to live up to our founding promises would be complete without recognition of the peaceful movements that have pushed this nation forward. From the abolitionists, to the suffragettes, to the countless brave, heroic souls who marched in support of the civil rights movement.
A long time.
Peaceable assemblies have moved mountains in this country. And they still can. When America saw the horrifying video of a police officer killing George Floyd, a brutal killing that evoked for many the nation's long history of racial discrimination and injustice, Americans rightly and peaceably assembled to demand justice. Justice for every American, regardless of skin color. But what began as legitimate protests against a vile act of abuse, sadly, were soon hijacked by opportunists and violent radicals. By early June, rioters had injured more than 700 law enforcement officers across the country and had murdered David Dorn, a retired officer who served St. Louis with honor for many years. They also damaged or destroyed countless buildings and businesses. In Minneapolis alone, rioters burned affordable housing and damaged over 400 businesses, many of them owned by African Americans, at a cost of well over $500 million in damages. In Philadelphia, police cars were set ablaze. In Seattle, rioters who damaged hundreds of buildings were granted and allowed to set up a so-called autonomous zone by local officials, who all too predictably resulted in more crime, including 4 shootings that cost 2 young people their lives.
And they said my
The
oil
fact
filter
is, the people who took the streets because their hearts cried out for justice
left that in.
What?
I got my oil change,
become
and they said
overshadowed
that my oil filter
by
is
rioters
still
and
brand
looters
new,
and those
so
who
they just bring it back
cynically
in,
exploit the
and then
protest for
they
their
should put a
own
new one in
evil
every time.
ends. And those rioters aren't concerned about racial justice.
Sure,
Indeed, they're
but
willing to
we'll
make a
care.
mockery of the peaceful protest to advance
it was wonderful.
their violent
It's air
objectives.
filter they're talking about.
Okay.
Because oil filters
Their
they change no matter
actions
what.
are
You
profoundly
can't see an oil
racist,
filter
the
when
rioters,
it's clean.
as they destroy minority communities, minority businesses, minority lives
Where'd you
across
go?
the country.
Look at this.
5.
This shouldn't be complicated.
You reading my card back?
Peaceful protests must be protected.
How much was it?
Riots must be
I
stopped.
think it was 39.
No one has a right to assault another person, to firebomb a building,
Did you get
to
synthetic
throw a
oil?
Molotov cocktail
That's
into
what
a
I-
police car.
Oh,
That's not exercising a constitutional
That's what I was
right. That
trying
is
to do.
terrorizing
They
your
said,
fellow citizens.
that.
More
the
and
setup
more,
that
we're
I
seeing
did last
signs
time
that a significant
was
portion
a
of
good
this
one.
violence, of this rioting, is
you
not
should-
random, it's not spontaneous.
I said.
Rather, it is coordinated and inspired by leftist, anarchist groups like Antifa, that will, without
Synthetic
shame,
oil for no
exploit a
reason
national
will make it
tragedy
last
to
longer.
attack American buildings, American homes,
Remember the words.
and American lives.
Synthetic.
This is happening in my home state, in Austin and Dallas. And it's happening across the country, whether in Minneapolis, Nevada City, Pittsburgh, or Toledo, to name a few. But tragically, nowhere more so than in Portland, Oregon.
Oh,
I like
In
Ted
Portland.
Cruz. He's a good man.
Antifa and other radicals have thrown metal pipes at DHS officers and used commercial-grade lasers to try to blind them, perhaps further.
You just get a
They
receipt
launched
along.
mortar-style attacks with commercial-grade fireworks. They firebombed a federal courthouse. This is not peaceful protest. This violence speaks for itself. But for good measure, in graffiti on the county courthouse, they wrote, "Until the police and ICE are abolished, We will burn this city down piece by piece. They are telling us what their demands are. To shut down and abolish the police. This violence should be universally condemned. All 100 senators ought to come together and say, don't murder your fellow citizens, don't attack police officers, protect each other's rights.
And guess what? I'm done. Boom.
Instead
All done.
of seeing
So,
leaders
that's
united,
it. So,
we're seeing too many local officials, mayors,
bye, Olof and Spin.
and governors
Bye.